I regretted it just because I was like, crap, like.
Hello, you've reached Taste, the podcast that sweetens up the blockchain and crypto powered new internet, leaving a great taste in your mouth afterwards. This is Kelly, your host. I serve tasty conversations with seriously on chain builders, innovators, and thought leaders every single week. Hello, hungry listeners. Today we're chatting with Debbie Soon, co-founder and chief growth officer of Hug.xyz, a global community of creatives to showcase, sell, and connect over their art. We start the pod off with Debbie's background. Now, mark my words, Debbie is one of those people that I believe can truly do anything if she puts her mind to it. And she definitely puts her mind to where it needs to be. She tells all from growing up and working in Singapore, to founding Southeast Asia's first boutique indoor cycling school, to bodybuilding, to working for sports media at One for the MMA vertical, and of course now building Hug for creators all around the world. Debbie is so cool, and I can't wait for you all to be inspired by her story. Enjoy and bon appetit. All right, Debbie Soon, you are the co-founder and chief growth officer at Hug, which makes me feel very warm and fuzzy inside. As far as I'm concerned, Hug is an organization empowering artists to be entrepreneurs through discovery, opportunity, and education. I love this mission. Firstly, how are you today? How's the hurricane? Is it blowing you away at all?
I'm doing really well, thank you. And yeah, like I said, I'm in Miami, so thankfully not super affected by the hurricane, just a lot of wind, but we're surviving.
Yeah, a bit of fresh air, I guess. But awesome. I'm super excited to have you on today. I think I discovered your profile just from, good old Twitter. But you were crazy. Like, you've done so much in your life. I think in our intro call, I was like, how does one human being go through so many different missions and trajectories in their life? And just super curious to learn about you. So let's kick off. I want to know your story. Let's start from where you grew up, because I think that's super important in how it shapes people and how they approach life. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your upbringing and background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Singapore born and raised, proudly so. Basically lived there my entire life aside from my 4 years in college. Kind of, grew up with, I had an older brother who was 6 years older than I was, and pretty kind of traditional Asian upbringing, if I would say. So, study hard, go to school, study hard, never really did much else. I remember I wanted to pick up sports when I was in primary school, elementary school, and my mom thought it was too unsafe. So, my very first, extracurricular activities was being a librarian, being in a math club, and being in a robotics club. And, I always felt like, I had to, follow everything to the book, especially since my brother was, kind of the standard overachiever. But yeah, I think somehow, over the years, that maybe put a chip on my shoulder or something. But I feel like once I kind of got into my early to mid 20s, I really felt kind of this desire to start taking more risks and really kind of leaning into, what is it that I would love to do for myself and what really inspires me, rather than kind of following the prescribed path that, a lot of people tend to do.
Yeah, I totally can understand that, growing up in an Asian household, not being, I guess, pushed to try different things. But it's super cool to hear that you kind of broke out of that mindset and you always knew that you wanted to, run with what you wanted. What kind of sports were you, if you could have done, sports when you were younger, what would you have done?
Yeah, when I was, I think initially I was very into basketball and netball. I did end up playing soccer for a little bit in high school for a couple of years in high school, and then actually went on to do competitive cheerleading once I got to college. So eventually kind of found my way into sports, but yeah, it took a while before, I think I had to get past a certain age where I was like, fine, I don't really care what my mom thinks anymore.
Love that. Are you quite tall? You can never tell, with...
Yeah, over the video is always so hard to say, I'm a 5'5", so not not super tall, average, I guess.
Okay, cool. Also, this is gonna be I always surprise my guests by stalking them beyond their channels, but are you a bodybuilder?
I was training, I was doing a lot of bodybuilding training, I guess starting from 2018 or 2019. And then like always kind of wanted to compete, although I think like that has I think that desire has kind of waned a little bit. But did probably the closest that I've got in terms of really following a regime, like really, really, a regimen really, really strictly was probably in COVID. And so the coach that I was working with was like, well, since, there aren't any competitions, like, what we could do instead is like a photo shoot prep. So kind of like the prepping, it's very similar to prepping for an actual bodybuilding competition, but you don't have to go quite to that same level of extremes. So yeah, actually, like, I think once I did that and got a taste of it, I was like, I think I got a sense of what that's like. But yeah, I still kind of really prioritize my training, and it's something that I look forward to doing.
Holy shit, that's so cool. I love people who can I feel like founders, they always I guess like the really efficient and proactive ones always like kind of prioritize their physical, their mental. They have everything, sorted out in that respect. They make sure to cover all, I guess, areas of their life. And I'm not surprised. I've always wanted to get more muscle, but I'm like, I love carbs so much. I'm like, I don't care if I'm soft.
Well, I mean, what they don't tell you actually, in order to I've built like a lot of muscle, like put a lot of muscle like over the years when I started in 2019 compared to now, and the way that I got there was by eating a lot of carbs actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like eating obviously a lot of protein, but also eating a lot of carbs. So you kind of have to, I mean, you can kind of like build muscle and lose fat at the same time, but usually it's pretty hard. So like I definitely went through like kind of like a slightly chubbier phase just because it's hard to build muscle without putting on a little bit of fat at the same time. So it's kind of like this uncomfortable period that you kind of have to go through. And it's funny because I think at the time, I obviously didn't feel like I was uncomfortable, but then like even looking at older photos during that quote unquote bulking phase, I was like, wow, I really did have like, chubbier cheeks back then. So, but yeah, like it actually, yeah, ate a lot of carbs. I would literally be eating bowls of cereal before bed just so I could get that the right carb intake that I was targeting.
Maybe I could do it then.
Yeah, you could.
I could do bowls of cereal before bed. That's really interesting. I've been like on this, kind of on the edge, like, should I get a nutritionist trainer like remotely and just try and like work on focus on this for a few years? I think it's worth it. I think it's very character building. It's a cool like story to tell at dinners, I guess. Like, hey, I went through a phase where I did all this intense stuff. But at the end of the day, I guess like your habits are like super good now because, like the nutritional requirements to be healthy, and you're more like conscious of your decisions.
Yeah, I would say that all of that, honestly, like, I think because I had a coach for a few years too, so I don't have a coach anymore, mostly because also my schedule got kind of hectic. But I would say working with a coach for a few years kind of gives you that like basic knowledge or understanding of like, okay, what exactly do I need to eat in a day? Like, you also get better about like eyeballing portions. So when I was like in my very, very strict phase, I would like measure. I mean, even till today, like occasionally I would still measure like a bunch of things, but like I would weigh everything to the gram of like my milk, like that I put in my cereal, like, 35 grams of cereal, like, 180 grams of chicken. I'll weigh everything to the minutia. And like, I think now, like, yeah, I still track like, most of my meals, but like, even when I don't, I can kind of roughly gauge like how much I'm eating. So
yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing to do at least once in your life, right? Like the portions and just nutrition in general these days is so out of like, it's so whack. I don't think people have any idea what they're putting into their bodies. And yeah, I think it's super healthy. So, and I think also Miami is a great place for that because everyone there is like super health conscious.
Yeah, everyone here is like super fit actually. So it's actually quite intimidating.
Every time I go there, I'm like, wow, I feel like a piece of tofu. But yeah. Okay, now that we've established that you're the kind of person who, when you have something that you want to do, you like go for it. You like go, you're a girl. So I can't say balls deep, but I will anyway. I want to know about how you have like 10 plus years of investing experience. I think you founded a fitness wellness studio that was like the first of its kind in Singapore. You've also done a bunch of stuff for like mixed martial arts. Like, this trajectory to me is really exciting to hear about. Can you kind of take us through like why you started with investing and how you ended up here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I was very fortunate. I think Singapore gives a lot of opportunities, but, I was fortunate enough to be awarded a scholarship from the Singapore government that essentially paid for my studies abroad. So, paid for my college and my grad school. The catch was that in return, you had to work for them for 6 years. So I like to call it like I was an indentured servant for 6 years. But, at the same time, it was a really great career opportunity, learned a lot. So it was in investing. So essentially working for the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund where, we're kind of deploying like taxpayers' money into, long-term investments to generate return for that can be reinvested in the country. And so I, again, got a lot of exposure like in that role, but I felt pretty early on kind of knew that investing or traditional finance really wasn't something that I felt super excited about, but obviously it was like, crap, I have another like 6 years to go before I can do anything else. So I guess almost on a whim, and again, I think maybe I was also young and a little crazy and didn't know what I didn't know, but at like 24, I decided that, hey, what if I started a business on the side? Like, I'm feeling like kind of not super enthused about my finance career. Like, sure, I'll just like, show up to work and like show up to the office and all of that. But what if I could have this really fun project to work on? And the idea came to me to open an indoor cycling studio in Singapore, kind of really inspired by SoulCycle. I will say the hilarious thing is that I had never actually been to a SoulCycle class before I made that decision. I think I read a New York Times article about SoulCycle. This is 2013, the end of 2013. I read an article about SoulCycle and I thought, wow, what an incredible like fitness concept. There's absolutely nothing like that in Singapore. All we have are yoga studios and like gyms, like your standard kind of big box gyms. And I just felt, well, I like yoga too, but like it's all like, really zen. Like what if somebody doesn't like want to be like zen and all of that, right? What is the other kind of outlet for them? So honestly, like made a decision pretty quickly, took whatever savings that I had at the time, like threw it into this business, kind of very quickly realized that holy crap, like there's like so many other things that I hadn't thought about, but nonetheless, it actually ended up being pretty successful. It was the first of its kind in Singapore, the first of its kind in Southeast Asia, ended up inspiring a lot of other kinds of similar studios or like innovative fitness concepts. And actually a lot of the instructors that I had hired ended up like going on to open their own fitness concepts. So I like to say, it's not like documented anywhere, but I feel like, almost kind of like a pioneer for the petite fitness scene in Singapore. But yeah, it ended up getting a little bit too much to kind of manage the side hustle, like alongside a full-time job. Like, I still obviously had a boss there. I couldn't afford to get fired because I still owed them money. So made the difficult decision to kind of like sell the business. We had somebody that was interested in buying it. And then yeah, kind of focus on my finance career for, the rest of my time. Ended up staying a year longer than I had intended. And I think finally was like, I have to get out of finance, and I really miss kind of rolling my sleeves, getting my hands dirty. And then the opportunity arose to join this really fast-paced startup called One Championship. So it's basically UFC's competitor in Asia. So they're a mixed martial arts promotion. So yeah, lots of live events, lots of fights. And yeah, there was a real, like, learned a lot in those 3 years there.
Damn. That's really, really cool. And I don't think many people would have the guts to kind of like throw all their savings at that age into a business and grow it. That's really, really cool. How did you keep it under the wrap? Like, how did you juggle both?
So I think people kind of knew that I was like involved, but I think from a legal standpoint, I remember putting my mom's name down as like an actual board of director. Like I wasn't paying myself anything. So like obviously I think as employees we were allowed to invest in things. So I think like on paper it just looked like I was investing in this studio, even though I was like, really involved in the day-to-day. Like I was, during lunchtime, like our studio was walking distance from the office. So every day at lunchtime, I would like run over. Sometimes I'm the one that's like manning the, front of house, checking people in for classes. I actually was an instructor myself. So I taught 2 to 3 times a week, I think. And so, would do that as well. And yeah, like it was a really, really fun time, to be honest. One of my favorite times.
Damn. It's crazy because you're like, you have never been to a Soul Cycle, and then now you're like, you were teaching classes in your business. So that's really cool. Do you still like do indoor cycling? Like, what are your thoughts on it now?
No, I don't. Like, it's so funny. Like, I guess after I sold off the business, I ended up getting into CrossFit. So I did CrossFit for a few years and then kind of ended up bodybuilding. And I think part of it too was like, once I started working at One Championship, to be honest, it was really a fast-paced environment. So, like schedules were a lot more unpredictable. So it's easier to pursue something like bodybuilding, which is kind of you do it solo versus like, having to go for classes or like doing it in community Pilates, which I still miss. But I think kind of right now I mostly kind of train alone just because it works better for my schedule.
Got it. Did you learn any MMA while you were working at One Championship?
Yeah, I mean, we had the founder and the CEO of One Championship, prior to One Championship, actually founded like a mixed martial arts gym, like a Muay Thai gym and all of that, jiu-jitsu. So took a couple of classes, like never really did too much of it, but like I took like a few like Muay Thai and like a couple of jiu-jitsu classes. Yeah.
Damn. So the like crazy story, like weird story, this Tuesday, a friend, he's like a stunt man. He loves to like do backflips just on the street. He's that kind of guy. He's crazy. He was like, hey, there's like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. Want to come? It's like 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'm usually in bed because I'm a fucking grandma. It was so like, I felt so like I'm not meant to be here, but it was so fun.
It is pretty fun.
The teacher was like, yeah, the teacher was like, I swear he was like 70 years old, but super experienced and still like, owning people, like flipping them over. Very fun experience. Okay, I want to know, what was your role in One Champion?
Yeah, gosh. So I originally joined, actually, it's funny. This was one of those where, when you're interviewing for a startup and like, I kid you not, I had no idea what role I was applying for. It was like, I got introduced to the CFO who was like, we're looking to hire someone like, and they called the role like a Navy SEAL kind of role. So I was like, I don't really know. I mean, if you Google kind of like corporate Navy SEALs, there is kind of like a definition to it. But at the same time, I was like, I don't really know. Like, what is the job title? Like, what is this? Anyway, it ended up, the official job title ended up being in corporate development. So I kind of did that for a few months, but eventually ended up being chief of staff to the CEO. So got to lead a whole bunch of like really exciting special projects or like the highest priority special projects for the company. So helped One Championship expand into Japan. So kind of led market entry for that. Like we were primarily like a Southeast Asian property. We had our first events in Japan. Like I think he said, I need somebody to help me run Japan. I said, okay, great. Like, who's working on it now? He was like, no one. And within 8 months, we had our first events there, like record-breaking like audience, ticket sales. So that was a lot of fun. We also wanted to expand into esports. So I kind of led our entry into esports. And then finally, after all of that, I got given my own P&L. So was running the consumer products business for them, which was really fun. So that was probably, got to kind of combine my creative side because I would work with designers and kind of be the creative director, if you will, in terms of this is the collection that we want, like, and I kind of work with them on that, but also working on things like marketing and the logistics, like warehousing. So also did anywhere from like e-commerce to like licensing. So we had a lot of like partnership conversations. So it was really, I think these 3 years was really about being thrown into the deep end and then kind of realizing that, hey, like there are ways to kind of learn on the job, if you will. And so long as you're willing to, be creative, like you can solve a whole bunch of, very complex problems. So yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, I love that. And I can kind of see how it's foreshadowing how you came onto Hug and like why it becomes such a, like you really love it. I can tell that you love it from the way you talk about it, from the way you have built it. I'm really, really impressed. But I'm curious, before we get into kind of that transition from One Champion to the Hug, what did you see yourself doing at that time, like 10 years ago, like when you had just graduated from high school? Did you have any idea?
Oh gosh, I mean, when I first graduated from high school, so I always knew that I wanted to study overseas. So I think like for me, and again, like I think I'm very fortunate to have grown up in Singapore, which has like a great education system. There are a lot of different government bodies that offer scholarships similar to the one that I got. So, like you could have landed a scholarship with the Foreign Service, for example, or you could have landed one with like the Ministry of Education so that you would become like a teacher. There were a lot of different kind of scholarships. And I remember, and it's tough honestly, because at 18, like I said, your 4 years of studies get paid for, and then you have to commit for 6 years of working with, whichever organization that you've picked. So basically at 18, you're making a decision for the next 10 years of your life with whatever limited information that you have, right? But obviously, like I think it's still an incredible opportunity to be able to go overseas, study, not have any student loans, and not to mention we got even a little bit of like a stipend, like, all of those things were covered. So yeah, I remember at the time, actually at 18, I really, really wanted to join the Foreign Service. I wanted to, I had ideas of like being like a diplomat or like an ambassador, ambassador to Singapore in a different country. And I think I was actually presented, fortunate enough to be presented with both opportunities. One was going into the Foreign Service, the other was, working for the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And then, I don't know, I think I spoke to a few people, they're like, well, in public service, like things move really quickly, so really slowly actually. So things move really slowly, like, policy work takes a really long time to, get put into place. Like, and I felt, I'm the kind of person who likes to see the results of my work quickly. And there is nothing more sombering or like humbling than working in finance or investments, because that feedback cycle is so quick. And so I ended up, going down that route and picking that path. But yeah, like I will say that again, throughout college, it wasn't like, oh, this is definitely what I want to do. It was a little bit more, I have to eventually move back to Singapore to work in this industry. Let me kind of make the most out of it.
Wow, cool. Yeah, 18 years presented with that choice. To be honest, what was I doing at that time? I couldn't even choose what I was going to have for dinner. So
yeah, same.
Cool. But I didn't know Singapore was like, we had that kind of program. I guess there's a few countries that I look at and I'm like, damn, I would love my kid to grow up there. And I think Singapore is definitely one of them. One for, you grow up immersed in so many different cultures. You learn so much, how to be understanding, tolerant. I remember I went there like during high school for like an ethics conference, and just the education system was so forward. Like they were always like pushing boundaries, like challenging their students. It was a very cool experience. And yeah, I guess that brings me to like number two. It's a place where they really, really reward and support high achievers. So, I mean, it's just that it's super expensive. In my mind, I'm like, oh, can I afford this?
I mean, it's like, it depends on what you value. Like, public transportation is dirt cheap. You can eat at hawker centers, like local food, really cheap as well. Yeah. So I think they make like the nice things like expensive. So if you want to own a car, it is, prohibitively and stupidly expensive. Like housing isn't that expensive either, but I guess if you're a local, they have public housing, which is actually pretty affordable. So going out, like alcohol and like all of the vices, the quote unquote vices they tax, go out to a bar. Like, I mean, I guess it's no different from any major city in the world, like a New York or a Los Angeles. But like if you had like a very modest lifestyle, like it is actually pretty affordable compared to most other developed cities.
See, interesting. I didn't know that. In my head, I was like, Singapore is expensive rent. I mean, food is very cheap and very delicious, but everything else, I was just like, yeah, this is a place where you need to, at least if you want to like live in the city center, have like a good lifestyle, it will take quite, your wallet will take quite the hit, but yeah, good to know. Yeah. I haven't been immersed too much.
Yeah. Great public transportation system, so you don't really have to live in the middle of the city. Like, you can hop into a train, it's like probably less than $1 for like a train ride. So like I said, really easy to get around, but yeah.
Very cool. And you're in the US right now, right?
Yes.
When did you move over and why?
Gosh, so like I was working at one, heading up consumer products, and again, it was really fun. To be honest, I really loved that role. Like I really enjoyed my team. Like it was like the job was fun, the people were great, and it was also during COVID, which like was interesting in that, we ended up spending, obviously a lot of the business ended up being in e-commerce versus outside of COVID, the business also focused on kind of like live, merchandise sales at a live event. If you've ever been to a concert, like a sporting event, like they always have like event merchandise sales. So yeah, like I think during COVID, finally I was just, I've always wanted to experience living and working in the US. I felt that since I graduated. Like, I think at the time when I was graduating, I was kind of sad to like go back to Singapore. And also one thing that I always have to tell people, that the Singapore of today like was not the Singapore of like when I had graduated from college. Like when I had just graduated from college, Marina Bay Sands, which is that iconic building that is in like all of the like, you know, aerial views, like that thing was like 2 years old. Like it was built 1 year, and like I remember coming back in the middle of summer being like, what is that? Like, you know, like where did that come from? So like, you know, when I first moved back to Singapore, it just was actually a lot more like, you know, didn't have the F&B scene. It just like was a little quieter and sleepier. But yeah, anywho, I guess like I've always wanted to experience living in and working in the US, but you know, never had the opportunity to. You know, all of a sudden it was like, gosh, I've already spent 10 years of my career like, you know, working in Singapore. And I just thought to myself, like, well, when else am I going to have that opportunity? Like if that is still something that I'm interested in exploring and seeing what that would bring, you know, now is as good a time as ever. And so I kind of quit my job. So I quit my job, packed 2 suitcases, brought my dog. I had a visa application that was still pending, so like it hadn't been approved yet, and then kind of moved to the US and was okay, great, now what? so yeah, like and you know, a lot of it too was like trying to build like my network from scratch, you know, since I didn't have any kind of professional network, right? Like the only real people that I knew in the US were like people I went to college with like 10 years prior. So yeah, like I guess once I came here, and then my visa got rejected a couple of times and I had to like put in an appeal. So honestly, for the first kind of like 8 months in the US or so, or like 7 to 8 months in the US, I actually thought that I don't think I'll be able to stay and I probably have to kind of go back to Singapore. And then finally I was lucky enough for my visa to get approved, and then that kind of opened up, you know, a whole bunch of other opportunities for me.
Damn. Wow. Did you move straight to Miami?
No, I was in LA, so I moved to Miami. I've only been in Miami for like 5 months.
Okay, that's crazy. Yeah. I love that. How did you go about kind of building your network? I can imagine it's like, you know, it's super scary to just jump into a new city and try to make a whole, I guess, like, yeah, net of friends.
Yeah, I mean, I applied for a whole bunch of jobs the moment I got to the US. I think I was lucky enough, again, I applied for this founder residency program for a VC fund that was based out of LA. Funnily enough, the VC fund is founded by Paris Hilton's husband. So it was just like, at the time, then fiance, which I just thought was like, wow, what a Los Angeles thing, right? Like you go here and like you're 2 degrees of separation from like a celebrity. But yeah, like, you know, I applied for this thing. I thought it would also give me that, you know, again, I was really considering, should I like found my own startup again? Like, you know, how could I learn with other people? Kind of like de-risk the idea. And so came across this founder residency program that looked really interesting, applied and kind of like didn't hear back, like hunted down the email of the person behind it, like sent a whole bunch of cold emails, you know, managed to kind of get myself into the process. And then actually the funny thing about it too was that they were originally only going to take in 12 people for this program. And then they called me to be like, you know, you're currently our reserve. And so if somebody like declines and we're waiting for somebody to, you know, we're waiting to hear on somebody's decision, you know, then if they say no, then, you know, you're in. And if they say yes, then basically like you're out. Which was kind of like a pretty crappy feeling. And so I was just like, oh, okay, well, that kind of sucks. Like, you know, I don't know if I necessarily would have handled it that way. But then anyway, they kept saying that we'll let you know really soon. And then like a couple of days went by, like still didn't hear back because I think maybe they were still waiting on a decision for this other person. The name of the VC fund is called M13. So then I actually reached back out and said, hey, maybe crazy idea. Since you call M13, have you considered taking in 13 people rather than 12, right? So like, you know, accepting me wouldn't have to depend on this like last person who, to today, I actually don't even know who it was. But and then they were like, you know, I was thinking the exact same thing. And so I somehow ended up like getting accepted into the program. And that was probably the very beginning of me being able to build, you know, at least some semblance of a network, like being in around fellow founders, being in kind of like the venture, like you know, having connections with the venture space. So that was kind of how at least I got my foot in the door and started kind of growing that network from there.
Okay, that is such a cool story. Okay, firstly, I really believe that most, you know, go-getters or like successful people, like sometimes it's luck, right? But Also, there's like these little things like this, how you thought of like M13. Crazy that they only accepted 12 people. Like that makes no sense in my head. But it's like a very creative suggestion, right? I don't really like most people, if they got that call and they were like, you might be in, but you might be out, they would be like disheartened. Like at least I think I would be like very upset and I wouldn't be able to like, I don't know, twirl my brain cells. But that's a very like fun, exciting story. So that's cool. Was that with the hug or were you?
No, that was before Hug. So yeah, that was like the year before Hug. And I mean, I was also kind of fortunate too because like it wasn't like at the time my visa still hadn't been like approved, right? But the founder residency program was kind of like a contractor role, like you weren't actually an employee of the company. Like so, you know, like that also allowed me to be able to work on that while I was still waiting for my visa. So, you know, there were a lot of these things where I don't know, like sometimes I feel like things are meant to be, you know, like things all kind of slowly fell into place, even though like there were ups and downs obviously throughout the process. But yeah, that's kind of how all of that happened.
Ah, that's so cool. Were you thinking about getting into crypto at all at that time, or what kind of startup were you actually, what did you have your eyes on?
Yeah, so that entire program was actually sponsored by PepsiCo, and strangely enough, like they were looking to fund concepts in health and wellness, maybe to make up for the fact that they sell sugary drinks as their main business like line. But obviously, given my previous work with my cycling studio, I was like, oh, I've always been really into health and wellness, so that was interesting for sure when I was working on it. Like definitely had no desire at the time to get into crypto or Web3, but as we were out kind of like, helping each other validate like different business concepts and like out in market kind of fundraising from other early stage VCs, like Web3 was the talk of the town. And I made my very first investment in crypto in 2019. And honestly at the time when I was still at One, and at the time I had no idea like what I just thought, I'm just gonna pick like a couple of coins and, it must go up, right? That's what everybody's telling me. Like I literally didn't even understand what the technology was. It wasn't so much as I couldn't be bothered as I just didn't have the time. Like I was just really, really busy like at One, right? So the only thing I could do was like set up a wallet, go to an exchange, buy something and like, close my eyes and forget it. And so I think it was during this time in 2021 where like a lot of the conversation around this and the funding environment was about like Web3. And so I really took the time to, look into it. And, when the program kind of wrapped up, that was when I felt, okay, you know what, like I actually think this is really interesting. And it was still kind of COVID-esque at the time, right? Like, so I think things were starting to open up, but for the most part, like people weren't really going out in full force meeting people. So turned to kind of internet communities to kind of build that network. And that's really how I just ended up getting sucked in deeper and deeper into kind of like Web3 and like really fell in love with the idea of like communities being like formed around NFTs and like digital ownership. So that was something that kind of really appealed to me.
That's really cool. I think COVID and the rise of Web3 were like a perfect,
100%. It's the perfect storm, yeah.
Wow. Because I also, I know that you found I think you met your co-founder through a Discord channel.
Yeah, so I met Randy Zuckerberg in a Discord server. Like at the time I started a Twitter account because I was okay, everybody's on Twitter, so I need to be on Twitter as well. On Twitter, my handle was my real name or like, Deb Soon. But on Discord, I was just using like a different name. So I actually met Randy on Discord. Like I was using one of those like gaming handles, but I met Randy on Discord, like, avatar as a profile picture, like not even my real name on Discord. Just started saying that, hey, I'm looking for my next opportunity. Would really love to work in this space. Like, ideally something to do with NFTs and creators. And she had been looking at a space as well. And then we connected like strangely, like again, purely by luck. I kind of put out this message saying that, hey, I'm looking to, enter this space. And she responded to that message 1 week later, which, as you know, in Discord time is like eternity, like so much so that I don't even know how she found that message. Like after the hundreds of messages that had like been exchanged in like a channel, somehow she found saw that message of mine, replied to it 1 week later being like, hey, I'm like thinking of like hiring for something like this. Like, do you want to jump in a call? And so, yeah, we connected over a Zoom call and then the rest of it is history, I guess.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. That's really crazy. Everything from like how you just like firstly, you were two cartoon avatars
Yeah,
talking about a very serious venture, and then Zoom call and boom.
basically.
So the hug was your kind of like brainchild. You know, how did you have this come up with this idea?
I mean, I think it's like something that has like really evolved over time. So I think when Randy had first reached out to me, she had already been advising a number of like NFT projects. So like the likes of Boss Beauties, I don't know, like a couple of like projects back in the day that she was advising. She was thinking of like really scaling that advisory like kind of business, almost like an accelerator for like NFT communities. Again, it's kind of like the bull market, so it almost felt like there was a real opportunity there. And then I guess like as the market started, like changing, with there were like so many NFT projects that they were like coming and going. We just decided, hey, we really want to focus on creators. Like, at the end of the day, like that's kind of how we view like the founders of these NFT projects as well. Like they're all like creators, entrepreneurs, and like we've always loved artists. And so that's kind of how like the overall mission was born to really empower these artists and creators towards entrepreneurship. And yeah, so I think Hug kind of went through, I wouldn't say pivot, but it definitely kind of went through its own evolution as well to kind of get to where it is today, right? And today we have over 30,000 users, like more than half of them are creators, and across like all sorts of different mediums, so and across like 170 countries, I think, as well.
Wow. Where did you start? I mean, also, I'm curious like how it kind of works with creators. Like say you discover a creator, what does that journey look like for them with the Hug?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think in the beginning, so we also built our own token gated community, if you will. So like that was in April of 2022. Yeah, like I think we started building a community then. And at the time it was very much like, hey, we have a vision for like a database. Like at the time it was just a database of creators. Like, obviously we know some, but like, we feel that the community should curate who they want to see in the database. So the first kind of like 100, 200 creators were actually suggestions from our community. It was actually a period of time where a bunch of people were working off like a Notion doc and just like putting in like their suggestions of these creators that they wanted to see on the platform. And so that was really how like the first 200 creators on Hug were like found, like they were actually suggested by the community. And then from then on, we opened up, anybody could apply to be on Hug, but if you wanted to be added, the community themselves had to vote you in. So like, we kind of kept the community like really involved, and gradually, I think in the beginning, kind of deliberately kept our growth like kind of modest and mindful, just to make sure that we could kind of manage how the community was evolving. And I think once we felt like, hey, we have a really good sense of how things are going here, was when we kind of opened things up. And so like we would actively go out, like we had a street team that would actively go out, invite people to become a part of the community. And once they're part of the community, they can kind of benefit from a variety of things that we're offering. So one thing that we're really proud of is like we work with a lot of brands and partners to organize or host open calls. So we connect artists to things like exhibitions, to grant opportunities, to job opportunities. So just this week, we've had artists being displayed all over the United Nations this week. And we've taken artists to Shibuya Crossing in Tokyo, Times Square. Probably to date, like must have placed like thousands of artists in events and exhibitions all over the world. Have similarly also distributed over $250,000 of like artist grants and scholarships. So that's that bit. And then they can also benefit from all the education programs that we offer, as well as resources that we make available to our creators. And then last but not least, we have some great platform tooling as well to make it really easy for them to kind of showcase and sell their work too.
Damn. And I'm guessing like the crypto aspect is that it's predominantly like digital art, right? Like it's...
Yes, I would say that definitely started that way. Probably majority of the artists are still kind of digital artists, or like artists that work, photographers, but you appreciate their work like through a digital medium. So, but I would say over the past kind of 12 months, we've definitely expanded outside of that space. So even though majority of our creators are still kind of very knowledgeable about like NFTs, we also have a growing number of artists that actually don't really know what NFTs are. Some of them are like physical painters, we have like some ceramicists or muralists as well. So really like the whole range of different types of artists that are kind of benefiting from what we have on the platform.
I like that. I like to see kind of brands or projects that were born out of that, like boom NFT time evolve into something that's definitely like catered towards a wider consumer audience. That's kind of the transition we were all like edging towards, but people are kind of like, oh, do we break up from the term like Web3 NFTs completely? Because still, I think there's a lot of like, when you say, like you said, you go out on the street and you like approach artists. I think if you said the word like, hey, we do NFTs, like in the first sentence, instantly, oh, look at that. Instantly they'd be like, oh, maybe this is not for me. Like there's still a stigma and maybe like
oh yeah, 100%.
unknowing.
Yeah, and we face that a lot too. Like we even had to change a lot of the language on our website to not have NFTs so front and center. Like we would identify artists that we thought would be a really good fit for the platform and the community, but in their bio on Instagram it literally says no NFTs. Like that's their description. It'll be, Jane Doe, sculptor, blah blah blah, like no NFTs. That is essentially their bio. And so, we really had to, which is a shame because obviously I think for us, we feel that this technology is really great at helping people monetize their audiences directly and can present a lot of opportunities. But obviously you don't have to limit yourself to just monetizing your work through blockchain. There are many different ways in which you can do it. And so we've always approached artists kind of from that holistic angle, like, we always say the key to any creative success is revenue diversification. You never know how opportunities are going to ebb and flow. And so the more well-versed you are with the different types of tools that are out there, the better, you could be at like kind of being successful.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Has your conviction on NFTs evolved or changed in any way since like founding the Hug back in the day, or?
I'm like, always bullish about the technology. I think like, and I didn't come up with this like analogy for sure, but I think it's similar to back in the day we used to download like MP3s to listen to music, and it was kind of like, what MP3s are you downloading? But now it really is just like, what music are you listening to, right? Like MP3 was really just like the file format of the technology in which that they were being delivered before we had like Spotify and all of that, and Apple Music and all of that. And I think similarly, NFTs at the end of the day, it's just the underlying technology reels. It's how am I selling a digital artwork? I do think that the way that we interact with the technology and the way that digital art is being collected, like I think we'll continue to see habits evolving, right? Like I think even in the past couple of years, we've seen it go from like really rare one-of-one pieces to limited editions, and then there was this whole open edition thing where now we have like lower cost mints that are like part of like a social experience. So I think that is going to constantly change as new consumers enter the space. The way that they value goods, it's also going to evolve, and there are going to be different things for different folks. But I think nonetheless, I think the technology is here to stay.
100%. I'm totally on board with that. And I remember like when I first got into like the space, or I actually started with NFTs. Like, I don't know if you know, but like my foray was, I was like dancing and I wanted to mint dance NFTs. And back then I was minting on Tezos because it was so expensive to do anything on any other chain. And now it's like, it almost just feels like posting to Instagram. It's so easy and so cheap and really fun. Like, you don't really need to understand exactly how the types of tokens work because, platforms like Lens or Zora, like they make it really easy for you to feel the fun in creating art. So it's super, super cool. Can you tell me more about the UN? How did you get that gift for your artist?
I work with a great team. We have we've had a lot of like landmark partnerships. Like we've partnered with L'Oreal, we've partnered with Dior. We've done like a project for an NFL team, and I'm like a huge football fan. So, we have like source artists for an NFL team. So similarly, I think we've had a bunch of different connections to different chapters of the UN, and the UN has a lot of different chapters as I'm now like learning about. But I think originally we worked with the International Office of Migration, and they were looking for art pieces that, really showcase the stories of migration. Like I said, we have a very, very international community of artists, and so they really liked the work that we did there. That kind of opened up the doors for other things. So just this past week, we had a member from my team kind of like sitting front row, like in the actual UN at a youth summit. So I think the Youth Affairs officers who we've been working with, again, working with artists to kind of showcase what their sustainable development goals would look like when imagined through a creative eye. Like I think it's a beauty about art. It allows other people to really understand some of these concepts and really get to feel it versus just like, reading all the text, right? Like it feels kind of dry. But yes, I think that's how we ended up working with them. And, we're excited to see what other kinds of activations we could do.
Awesome. And when you get a gig like that or like a contract like that, do you tap into your database, or like do you put out like an application? How do artists get chosen for these contracts?
Yeah, so we have open calls that anybody can browse. So you can kind of visit our open call landing page, and we have like, I think right now, probably 20 plus opportunities that are live. So our community that's already there, like they will definitely get in the habit of like checking what's available. We also email them. We also use it as a growth tool. So, we are constantly out there, like we are on Instagram. So, we still obviously post to Twitter, but over the past 12 months, again, as we've tried to expand outside of Web3, we've really kind of focused on like, okay, how do we reach new audiences? And so we're also, sharing on Instagram, getting new artists in that way. And again, like, we've always felt like we don't need to shove like NFTs or blockchain down an artist's throat. We can present them with the opportunities, and it's almost kind of like Trojan horsing them into, this technology that is there. And, like as they kind of meet other people, fellow artists, actually, they didn't realize that, it's not actually like the technology for whatever reason is being like demonized, but like it really doesn't have to be that way.
I love that. You have like nearly 29.5K followers on Instagram, last I checked. That's insane. Has that been like, when did you start that? And
we had like 2,000 like about a year ago, so we've really kind of 10x that growth like in that past year. Yeah.
And were you like testing different strategies, or were you like, did you just kind of like stick with what you were doing from the beginning and then it kind of like compounded exponentially?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we definitely tried with a lot of different, types of content. And I also have to shout out my marketing manager, Tina. So, she's behind a lot of the creative development there. But, we started originally kind of, we had like a content calendar of like different verticals, like some educational contents and just like inspirational quotes, and then like features. And then I think over time we got a sense of like, okay, which ones are really resonating, found a couple of like, growth engagement algorithm hacking tools, you're like getting people to engage and like props your content get it in front of more people. So I think over time that we just kind of really figured out like exactly, what kind of content resonates. And so I have just been like doubling down on those pieces of content.
Love it. I've been reading a lot about how like consumer projects are actually tapping into these like more traditional platforms and seeing growth there. And I think that's really cool, because I think that's where like we're all going to converge, right? We're going to be able to like tap into the non like rabbit holed people, and then connect them with like the beauty of what we like experience every day on a crypto Twitter.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
It's going to eventually converge. So yay. Very cool. So we have like, I think less than 10 minutes, but I do want to like kind of get into your book, which is very cool. I really don't know what you haven't done at this point. But,
I haven't done a lot. I can assure you.
Yeah. Why did you like decide to write a book? I think everyone has like this dream, right? Oh yeah, one day I'm going to write a book. But yeah, like what's the story behind this?
Oh my gosh, okay. So I don't think I ever thought that I would write a book, like ever. Like I don't think it was on. I mean, I think I'm really excited about it, but I don't think it was something that I set out to do, really. But, I think part of when I first entered the space, I will say I am guilty that I haven't really written as much as I used to. But I think my first year of being in the space, I used to write a lot of like Twitter threads and just kind of sharing my learnings as I went along and just kind of documenting that. And I guess through that process, somehow caught the eye of like a publisher from Wiley. Just, I got reached out to being like, hey, have you ever considered writing a book? And I said like, well, no, not really. Like, I don't even know what I would write about. And then at the time I was also kind of, really busy with like certain things at Hug. We were in the middle of a fundraise. So I was just like, now it's not the right time. And then, this is also kind of reminds me when I did that whole cycling studio thing. Like, I think after the round closed, I was just like, hey, like maybe that seems like I'm never one to say no to opportunities. And so I like reached back out and said like, hey, is this offer still on the table? Like, do you still want me to kind of work on this? And then she said like, yeah, like put together like a book proposal and like, let's see. And then I put together a book proposal and they were like, great, like we got the green light, you're good to go. And then I almost feel like immediately after that, I regretted it just because I was like, crap, like, wait, how many words do I have to write again? And you want it in like 6 months. And so like, and again, I'm running a business, like, that's my whole job. And so like, I ended up pushing back the deadline like so many times. But I think finally got down to like really putting my heads down and like writing it over the holidays of last year. But I guess, yeah, I think the one thing that I'm really proud of for the book, and the book is called Digital Mavericks, and I call it like a guide to Web3, NFTs, and becoming the main character of the next internet revolution. And it's really about just inspiring other people to take chances and take risks too. And part of how like I really wanted to, make, I guess, this industry more appealing to others was to share the stories of, people that I really admire and respect. And there are like 13 feature stories of, people like Jesse Pollock from Base, or like my co-founder, Randy Zuckerberg, or, different artists like Claire Silver, who's an AI artist. And I think the one thing that you would notice from every single person's stories is that like we all come from such different backgrounds, but like there is something in all of us that, makes us wanting to take risks and, dream and do. And even if it doesn't all work out, like, we all make mistakes, and this industry changes so fast. There's no, like, success is absolutely not guaranteed. But like somehow in that process, like we've all somehow managed to land here. And I think that's something that's so beautiful. And I hope that more people can kind of join us in this, quote unquote new internet.
100%. And I think that's definitely a big reason for like, at least I don't think I'll ever leave this industry because, okay, firstly, maybe I'm unhireable. Like I cannot work in a normal company anymore or a normal industry. But yeah, number two is that, as much as like conferences, like I've been on a big conference cleanse this year, but I loved going because I would like every time you'd go, you'd meet new people, right? So long as you don't go to every single one.
Right.
And they're all like, you just meet people from all different walks of life. And I felt like really, even though everyone was so different, I felt like at home. Like I felt like I finally like met people who I belonged with. Like they were all like you said, risk takers, I guess optimists in some, realist, like practical, but also like, realistic way. And never afraid of changes, whether bad or good, always like, okay, but like onwards, or, okay, but let's try something else, or always challenging norms as well. So I think that's the beauty of where we are today, and very exciting that you're writing a book on it. I hope you're also like infusing your experience from different industries.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, my story is definitely kind of like peppered throughout it. So I've like got the opportunity to kind of share a little bit of my story as well. But yeah, like I said, the book is like 50% like how does one even navigate and enter this space, and 50% like these amazing stories from people. So it's like a nice little balance of the two.
I love it. When you were like sitting down to write it, did you find the process easier or harder than you imagined?
Oh, I mean, it was definitely harder like than I thought. Like 50,000 words is a lot of words. I guess that's like the average length of like a hardcover book. And like, I mean, as much as I had a book outline, like sometimes as you're writing it, like your brain kind of takes you to a different spot. So then you're like, I'm not really kind of keeping to the plan. But honestly, it was easier to write kind of like the features of people, because I think one thing that I've learned from this experience is that I really enjoy telling other people's stories. And I think maybe you get this too from interviewing folks. A lot of the times when people live their own lives, their lives don't make sense to themselves. Like they can't see their own story. But like when you actually interview someone and you kind of like pull it all together, like even though somebody's story can like mine can be as crazy as like going from finance, opening a cycling studio, to being like MMA, to like, blah, 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 all of these different things, like somehow like it kind of makes sense when you put it on paper. And I really enjoy like telling people's stories in a way that they may not have necessarily seen it or appreciated it themselves.
I really like resonate with that. Yeah, I think people should tell more stories, not only about themselves, but of others, because it does help you tie things together. Like I see every life as like a tapestry of different fabrics, right? Like you go through different patterns and different, I guess, colors. And it's like at the end, it's so beautiful. Also like just to help with like where you want to go as well. Once you have that lined out, it's so much easier like moving forward. Yeah, when release?
February, I think. So yeah, I'm excited. Like another like 6 months or so. So 6 months? Yeah, I can count like five months.
Holy crap, takes longer than a baby.
I know, right?
That's awesome. Okay, well, I think we're at time. I don't want to keep you any longer. I'm sure you're very, very busy. But Debbie, this was really, really fun. I've loved getting to know you and your story. Where can people kind of find you the most active, and what should we be looking out for?
Oh gosh, yeah, you can find me on X, I guess. I'm at Deb soon. I'm also on Backcaster at Debbie, so you can probably find me there both. My Instagram is kind of like more of like a personal Instagram, where if you are not interested in like Web3 stuff, I mostly just share memes and random stuff there. It's at Soon Diggity, so I know it makes it like, I kind of keep a different handle, like on purpose probably. But yeah, and then I guess I need to update my book website soon, but one can visit digitalmavericks.xyz, and I hope to have more updates there as we get closer to the book launch date.
Amazing. I will drop all those links in the bio so no one has to like take notes while they're listening, but amazing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.